So the very first thing I do is I want to make sure that the base is orientated in a way where it's going to have the best outcome when you're looking at the model. So for that, the way this particular base goes is the model sits on it so that this will actually be the front, which means I need to preserve the left half of the base more than the back half of the base, as this will be facing away from the user when they're looking down at the model. So because of that, when I rotate the base, I always rotate it with the good end, the presentation end, up a little bit. And for this one, I'm gonna do about 8 degrees. I don't do a lot of rotation on my bases, and that's because I don't like it to be lifted too high up in the air. If I do that, that's longer supports, more chance for failure. And if I'm just printing a base, it can actually make it taller. If you go way up, you can have increase your print time and really long supports. So I don't like that. I like to keep it nice and kind of low, because really all you're trying to do by even rotating it is not print a big, huge wall at the same time. If it's flat, you have to print the entire flat base at once. But with this one, I'm really only printing a small bit every layer. As you can see, it's very slowly growing. So that's more than enough tilt to overcome that problem. The next thing I like to do is I click on the magic button and make sure everything's off except for the raft. Click on Feeling Lucky. That raises my base by 5 millimeters. You can adjust that in the settings on Lychee. I think 4 is default, but maybe it's 5, but I like it 5. That rotates it and it puts the raft. I like this raft the best. It puts an edge on it so you can get a scraper underneath it. It also makes good surface area on the build plate, so you get really good bed adhesion. And for something like this, you do want some decent bed adhesion. So now that I've got my base rotated and ready to go, now it's time to start doing supports. The supports I like to use are medium. My medium is a 0.4 tip and a 1.3 diameter. I'm not sure that I got set to 3.0. At 1.3 diameter. I use this because it has to do with the spacing, and I'll kind of show you later why I use this. So I like to start on the part of the model that's lowest to the build plate. So for this one, it's the back. And we're going to take use of a feature Lychee added in 5.0. You can see the top right what version of Lychee you're on. This one says 5.0 for those who can't read it. And then I use what's called inline supports. For the exterior, which I'm going to be doing now, is I'm going to be doing around the perimeter, is I like to use 1.8. And that one's kind of built out with the way that my supports are built out. So that way the tip diameter and the shaft diameter leaves a nice gap in between. And I want that gap for resin flow. So what you just saw me do was the new inline, which is where, I'll start over on that one, is if you, come on, Lychee. If you click and then you hold shift, it will draw a line of supports anywhere that your cursor is at. And then if you click again, it will create that line. Now, you can also just keep holding down shift. You don't even have to let go. And you can just go through and just click, 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 click. And it's quite fast. It's a really good way to put down supports, as you can see. It works on round, not as well. So if you have a round raft, you can still do it. You just can't go too far because you can see the supports start to get too far from the edge. And we don't want them on the edge, but we want them close to the edge. So I find I can usually do, depending on how big it is, I can do 3 or 4 supports at a time before I have to click again. But it's still quite fast, as you can imagine. Going around in a circle, you can make, I have nothing to follow, so it's hard to tell, but you can kind of make a curved line using it as well. Here's another thing that's kind of nice. You'll see I'm struggling with some of the slowness. And that's because I've got my slider down. And so when the slider's down, it's harder for Lychee. So if you slide it all the way up, it doesn't completely make it go away, but it does increase the performance by a fair amount. So I'll delete these ones that I made. And I will want supports on these areas as well, since it's just kind of the edge of the model. It's what's going to get printed first. I won't need to do it for the rest of it, but here on the bottom, I'll want them. So here's an example where I've already finished the supporting going around the perimeter of the entire object. As you can see, So now what I want to do now is, this is a completely optional thing. I like doing it, especially for models I'm going to make a lot of prints of. Some models I purchased the rights to so I can sell the printed version, so I'm going to be doing quite a few. Or I just want to look really, really pretty for all the people on the internet. So what I do on that one is I'll go through and I'll select every other support. And I'll go not all the way around, but I'll go around to about where they, maybe like right here on both sides, to where it's the shafts start to get a little shorter, where I don't really care about what I'm about to do. And what I'm about to do is going to be called parenting. So I'll go through and delete every other one, or select every other one and delete it. And I've already done that in this one, where I've gone through and deleted every other one. So that's about where I'll go with it. You can kind of see it's about the same spot on each side, where I've gone through and deleted every other support, maybe one more on this side. And the next thing I do is I'm going to do parenting. So start in the back and just hold down, click and hold Alt. And when Alt's held, this allows you to place the base wherever you want in Lychee. Instead of just, it builds the whole support. Alt lets you pick both the tip and the base of a support. And on these ones, I'm just going to put the base on the next support. And this is called parenting. So Lychee does have a way to do parenting, a parenting button, but I'll give you a little demo of what that looks like and why I don't use it. And I hope this is just enough. The taller they are and the more there are, the worse it gets. I did a couple okay, but every once in a while there's these just really long ones. We'll do another one that's a little taller. And it just, yeah, it's awful. I refuse to use it. Oh, I mean, if they made it better, I would start using it. It would save me some time. But really, it's not that much time to go through and do this, especially, like I said, if it's a base, I'm going to be printing a lot. And what this is going to do, like why I do this, is not just for looks. I'm saving some resin by not creating the entire shaft. And I'm also increasing the chances of success. Because if this fails, this would still be connected like this. And so what would happen is these would print. What I wouldn't get is the center one. Most likely I wouldn't get the center one. Sometimes you still do, but because there's enough here to kind of pull it on and still print that. But that's enough where I'm not going to have an issue with where there's not enough supports. Here on the back it doesn't matter, but on the sides or other places, having a big gap like this is enough to create a bow where you start to see some deformation. And if you lose too many, that now you don't have enough tips, and you actually just get failure of your part entirely. So I'll go through around the rest of the way and just do the parenting for the rest of the model, where I've already done that, so you don't have to sit there and watch me. But here we go. Parenting is now done. All the way around, looks nice and pretty, saves some resin, increased chances of success. The next thing I do is I do want to do some bracing. And again, Lychee does have bracing, and it works okay on certain things, but it's terrible on these kind of things. The more I grab, the more I brace, the worse it starts to see, where it just kind of gets in the way. I just really don't care for it. I've seen a few cases where if you get too much geometry, especially down by the raft, it will just not print. So that's something to kind of watch out for. I've definitely seen it where braces go down like this, especially if there's another one that's coming out here as well, where I don't know if it's just there's too much geometry, and it just doesn't print sometimes. So you just have a place where you just have a nice, clean, polished raft and no shafts coming out of it. And I've seen that's been some of the issue. So the bracings that I use are, sorry, a little slow again. There we go. Are going to be a little more manual. Again, a little manual work, but once you get used to it, it's really not that hard. On a more round base, it's a little easier. This base is a little odd shaped, so it's a little tough. But I try to span 3 if I can. If the brace is about 45, I'm okay with it. If it starts to get too lateral on the build plate, I might only span 2 instead of 3. And then I'll kind of do that all the way around. And as I get further down to these ones are getting really short, and I don't care as much. I mean, I care, but the chances of them having an issue and bending is really low. So on something like this, when I get here, I'm just going to be doing like a single one, just kind of like that. It's going to save some resin. It's just, Probably not necessary, but it's nice to have a little bit of insurance. I'll do something like that just on the first view, and then they get even shorter to where it's not even worth the effort. And kind of same thing on these ones. If they're a little too far away, I'll do the 3, but yeah, just kind of go around like that and do that on these ones as well, until I'm go all the way around, which I've done on the next one. So on this one, I've already gone through and I've braced all the way around. Didn't take too long. It takes a little effort, but it really increases the success of this. And if you ever have one of these not print, it's going to hit this bracing right here, and then it's going to start printing. So you could have the bottom half of both of these missing, but the top half will still be there, which is the important bit. That's the part that contacts the model and that keeps it nice and straight and level when it's all printed. So now that the bottom's done, what I like to do now is I just grab all the supports and I'm going to tag them. So supports, tags, and I already have a tag called I called outer supports. If you don't have one, you can just go to create new. I guess we can do that right now. Just just call it 1, and then tag assign tag. We'll just call this one 1. So now what this does, if I don't have any supports selected and if I accidentally deselect them for some reason, I can go back into the tags and grab one, and now I've selected all those ones. What I'm going to do, what's called a double row. This comes from Ty from Table Flip Games. I started using it more recently. I have noticed there's some advantages to it, so I like to do it. So on this one, I'm going to keep my same interval of 1.8, and I'm going to back off a little bit because I don't want to make a wall. So I hate to put supports, right behind here. So I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap so resin can get through. And I want to try to offset these if I can. I'm not going to be too picky on it, but I do want to kind of in between them. And I'm only going to do this on the row that's closest to where I have to print. I don't care about the back edge. I only care about the front edge. So I'll kind of come in here and just add a couple for a double row on this leading edge. It's really on the leading edge of the print itself, because as this print gets more and more developed, it's going to get bigger and fatter, which means it's just got enough kind of here to kind of keep the print going. It's really down here at the very bottom, this leading edge, where there's nothing above it to help support that and win the tug of war game between the model and the FEP. So that gets me the double row, which in this one, I've already done that as well. So now what we want to do is hollow it out. So on this one, for hollowing, what I like to do is you just click on hollow. Always use 3D hollowing. 2D hollowing, stay away from it. It's garbage. Yeah, you got to pay for it, but it's worth it. So the thickness on a base, I like to do 2.0 and 2.0 quality. I've done the hollowing on this one already to kind of show you what the quality is, because I get questions on that all the time. So the quality is how many polygons are going to be inside. So if I turn this down and update it, you're going to see these pictures. These get really big polygons. They're not even polygons, they're triangles. And if I go all the way up, I'm going to start to get just a much higher density. It's going to be more accurate, but it's going to cause some issues. I've noticed with some of the exterior, where you start to get some weird artifacts on some models, especially models a little thinner. So I've found it's really 2 or even a little under 2 is about where I like to go on that one. It can increase how much hollowing you get if something's kind of thin. Increasing that can make it a better hollow and maintain the same thickness. So once it's hollowed, I want to now do holes. So I want to make sure that this guy drains resin. So it's sitting upside down on the, after it's done printing, and I want it to drain as much resin as I can before I remove it from the build plate. So I'm always looking for the tallest spot I can put resin. Of course, the tallest spot is, where it's going to finally print. On this one, I got this cool little smokestack here that I could hollow out and might actually kind of look kind of cool in the final product. So let's do that. I want to make sure it's thin enough, or the hollow is long enough that it actually penetrates into the cavity, which there it does. And then keys. Keys are a really good place to hollow, to put some holes into, because you're never going to see them. And it's just a good place to drain for both the IPA and everything else. as you're cleaning it. Also a good place for light to kind of get inside and help kind of cure the inside of it. Once I've added the drain holes on the top, I need to now make sure I don't have any suction cups. So when this thing's printing, until you get a hole, the very first hole that breaks the model, you have a suction cup. On this one, you'd have a suction cup all the way through. So to prevent that from happening, you need to have a hole on the bottom, and you want it at the lowest point that you can. This is a base, so I can pretty much put it anywhere on the bottom, and it's going to do a pretty good job at... we can't see it, so it doesn't really matter. I'm going to use this cube on this one just because this surface is a square, and I can bring it right up next to it. It doesn't need to be quite that big. So now, as it's printing, I always have the hole there to prevent any suction cups from forming. So it's going to be able to print just fine as it goes up. Next thing I want to do is just add a few more holes. It's going to be nice just for cleaning and getting some light through. We just put one big one in the center and some smaller ones kind of towards the outside. Just, again, kind of disperse where the IPA or water is going to run, depending on your cleaning method, and or the cleaner, I guess. And then, of course, the big one is so I can get some light in there and cure the inside of the model. So the next thing we need to do after we've got our holes in and our model's nice and hollowed out is when this is done, these holes are going to be hard edges. So especially the back, this back edge right here is going to be the same as this edge right here. If there's nothing to support it, you can start to fail. And you'll see sometimes where there'll be a failure that starts small and kind of grows in like a big triangle. And that's just sometimes because there's either a hollow or there's even the geometry of the object. And there wasn't a support there. So it just starts to break until something can grab it again and start printing it. But even if you have supports back here, they won't be grabbing on anything. You'll just be printing supports with nothing on it because you already started failing the main object. So you just want to make sure that doesn't happen. I want to come through and support these as if they are edges. So the way I do that one is just kind of like clocks. Just put a support on the top, bottom, left. Yeah, I'll go through each one of these ones and just kind of do a support like this. And then the next thing I'll do is I'll highlight them all. And then this is where I will actually just use the regular lychee bracers. They're usually fine for this. And it's kind of the same thing. And these smaller ones are going to brace even easier. And I want them, I'm placing these kind of close to the edge of where the hollow is going to go, but I want to make sure they're not being intersected by the hollowing, which none of these are. So now from here, I want to fill it all out. So for filling, I don't need the same densities for the outsides. The outside is going to really keep the shape of this base flat. It's going to do most of the heavy lifting. Now I just want to infill to keep it so I don't get some bowing or layer separation, things like that as it prints the inside. So for fill, I do 4 millimeters instead of the 1.8. And now I'm just going to go through and just kind of find a good starting spot, and then just offset it on every single one. I can use the rows that can help me out. The row I start on is probably the row I want to end on, and then just kind of go through and do that through the entire model. These ones are not quite the same density. And how close I make these to each other, how perfect I go through as far as my kind of offset pattern is up to how much time I have and how much I want to make it really, really pretty. Could also be maybe the popularity of that model and how many times I'm planning on printing it. I may put a little extra effort to really get a good pattern versus quickly throw it out. But here's one where the fill is already done. On this one, I'm missing the bracings as well. So what I'll do here is go back and grab my outer supports. Oh, I don't have it on this one. Oh, yes, I do. Turn them off. Okay. So what I like to do now for the fill, because it's not as important, is I really only want the taller ones. So for this one, it's going to be about maybe a little less than halfway. So I look at the top and I try to make sure when I'm grabbing it my selector is in line with the grid. So I got this grid line right here. So I'll just kind of rotate the model till I'm pretty much right there. That way I'm grabbing the same supports on both sides. And then from here, I'll hit bracing. I'll do a quick check just to make sure there's no bracings that are really, really close to the build plate. Kind of what I described earlier. That's, I've noticed it just causes some failures, and they all look like they're above it, so I'm fine. And then we turn the edge back on. We kind of have this look. So at this point, we're mostly done. We've really supported really over supported, but this is going to print very, very flat. It's going to require very little sanding, or really any at all, but I would sand it just so it's not kind of rough on the bottom. But this will be a flat piece that won't wobble or anything like that. So the next thing we do is we'll want to do an island search, because now we have to look for anything on the top or anything on the bottom we may have missed, but we also have to support the inside. We have not done the interior of the model yet, which for that one, you click on the top and bottom right here, which show you inside or the outside of the model. So for supporting the inside, we want to see the inside, and we kind of just want to get the slider to where we can see as much as we can in a single view. And then we'll do an island search. So click on island and make sure the model selected and click search. And that should show you what's going on. Let's see what I got here. So this is one where I've already done the island search on. And as you can see, we've got quite a few islands inside and some islands on the top. And really, we just want to go through and get most of these islands. Some of them we don't care, like these little weird ones up here. They don't matter, especially they're going to be where another object's going to be. But we want to get rid of, we really want to make sure we capture especially these ones for the keys. Because if we don't, these are just going to be flat. And these whole things right here just aren't going to print. They're just going to be flat as they squish down towards the bottom of the base. So I have a setting I called interior pillar, which the diameter is 1.5 for the tip and the shaft. So what it ends up making is something that just looks like this. It's really just a shaft. The point of being is this is not supposed to be something that ever comes loose. It's permanent, so I don't want it to go down to a tip. Because if it does break on later on, I end up with like a rattle with a bunch of pieces inside. I got some bigger holes on this one, so I could probably get them out, but on some pieces that I do, just on a base, you don't end up with these big holes. You can go in and clean out pieces that break. So I use the pillar instead of a normal support tip. And on this one, I'm just going to go through and grab the islands as well as any big flat spots, because this flat spot's just a roof like anything else. So I want to make sure that I've got enough of these. I don't have to go very thick on these. This isn't like supporting a bunch of other things where it's really going to matter that much. If there is some layer separation or some geometry that doesn't look perfect, it's really not going to be a problem. It's all inside. So I really just mostly want to make sure these keys specifically are going to have a really good chance of printing properly. And obviously, the islands and big flat spots. So, and there's one where I've done it already. So I've gone through and placed the pillars really where they need to go. I've got them on the keys. I've got them on the big flat spots. And after we've finished doing the internal supports, we're done. One thing I did off camera was to finish doing some of the top geometry. That's a little out of scope for this video, which is why I didn't show it. Just normal supporting rules apply to that, as well as many of your bases won't even have in geometry or have a lot more. So that's pretty much it. As you can see, we're all done. It's definitely kind of pretty in my opinion. At first, it took me a while to learn how to do this and to get good at it. But after a few attempts, I've got it down to where I did this model previous to making this video in about 10 minutes. In the description of this video, I'll have a link to my guide called J3D Tech's Guide to Resin Printing, Beginners to Advanced. There's a lot of good stuff in there, so I hope you take the time to read it. And thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I hope you have a good day.